All right. Thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. My name is Fred Diamond. Of course, I'm the author of Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, thank you so much. Go up, give us a thumbs up, give us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Amy, we got a lot of people who comment as they listen or read or watch the show. We transcribe them all, of course. And if you're watching or listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please go up, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that as well. Again, the book, Love, Hope, Lyme, is available on Amazon. And Amy, I also give away the PDF for free. I've been giving away the PDF of Love, Hope, Lyme from day one, have given out close to 2,000 copies. So if you're a chronic Lyme survivor and you're looking for more support from your community, from your family, from your friends, reach out to me either via Facebook or LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to send it to you. So for a lot of people who've listened to the podcast or who've read the book, when I was beginning to figure out how someone in my life was, how chronic Lyme affected them, I read almost everything, in the summer of 2021. And one of the great authors that I had come across was Amy Scher. And one of the things I was trying to understand was anxiety and how anxiety played such a big role with chronic Lyme survivors. As a matter of fact, I've actually bought numerous copies of the book and had given it out to many people who don't have chronic Lyme disease, who are struggling with anxiety. As you know, it's something that a lot of I guess they're Gen Y. I guess a lot of people, in their 20s struggle with. So I read probably 3 or 4 of your books, and I'm excited to have you here today. And we're going to be talking about healing. And we're going to be talking about some of the processes that Amy teaches and has spoken about and has written about. Amy is known for her memoir, This Is How I Saved My Life. It was published in 2018. And of course, her popular How to Heal Yourself book series, How to Heal Yourself When No One Else Can. And it was just, Amy, when I was reading both those books, and actually probably 3 or 4 of your books back in the summer 2021, for me, they were page turners. I was kind of like, I'm like, oh, that explains a lot. That explains a lot. That explains a lot. And for people listening as well, you also are a chronic Lyme survivor. You're very upfront about that. You talk about that throughout your books. And it's exciting to have you here. Again, we've communicated back and forth for the last couple of years, and I'm really excited to get deep into your process for healing. So, Amy, we're going to go through your process, but why don't you give us an introduction so people know who you are? And like I said, I'm really thrilled to get your story out there and your advice for the people listening.
Thanks so much, Fred. Thanks for having me here. I'm so happy to meet you after all this time, after all these emails, and thank you for all you do. I have also shared your work as you've shared mine, and so I think it's a
Thanks.
mutual admiration society here. So thank you for having me. So my background, you gave a lot of my background, so you made it easy for me. But I suffered from chronic Lyme disease for about 10 years and suffered greatly. I was bedridden for some of that 10 years. I had neurological involvement. That was probably the hardest part for me, was that I had nerve damage, nerve pain, full body pain, exhaustion, problems moving my muscles, using my hands, walking, all of the things. On top of that, I also had, as you spoke about, extreme anxiety because I was in my 20s when it started. And really, I think 2 things are triggered in with people experiencing Lyme. One is just the fear around illness, but also what our brains are doing, right? That we're going into fight, flight, or freeze by dealing with this chronic illness. And so that alone can have sort of a create anxiety, just in a physical way, even less than being aware that we're scared of something or fearful or anxious. And so I had a very long journey to healing, but in the end, it was worth my persistence and perseverance because I have been very well for over 10 years now, and no relapses, no symptoms, no nothing, which I couldn't have imagined so many years ago. And I always tried to tell people that I couldn't imagine it often, but I insisted that it could happen. And so even though, it felt hopeless many times in my life, I persisted. And I tell my students and clients that one of my worst months ever was right before the month that I started feeling better. And I remind people about that because you just never know when you're going to turn a corner, but you have to be there for when it happens, right? To experience the joy and the relief that comes. And so it's a great lesson that I learned. So I went on after my own healing to write multiple books, including, as you mentioned, the How to Heal Yourself When No One Else Can series. The first book in the series was How to Heal Yourself When No One Else Can, which focuses on chronic illness like Lyme, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, that type of thing. And then How to Heal Yourself from Anxiety, and then How to Heal Yourself from Depression. And I also wrote a memoir with Simon and Schuster called This Is How I Saved My Life. I have another book coming out in 2026 called Your Body is Talking, about really how to decode those deeper messages from our body that are coming through illness, and what your body is not it's not turning against you, it is turning to you through illness to try to tell you what you need to pay attention to. And so that's sort of me in a nutshell. I teach classes. I no longer see clients, but I have a certified practitioner who's incredible, who does one-on-one sessions, and we're out to help heal the world, as many people as we can.
Well, I'm glad you're out there. And like I said, you have a very bright and unique message and a very bright and unique way of getting it out there. When I was going through your website, I saw a great quote there where it said, Amy had an epiphany that healing is more than just physical. If treating the body alone doesn't solve the problem, then the body alone isn't what created it. Talk about that for a moment or two.
Yeah, so it resonates so deeply, even though I experienced it so long ago and wrote that quote so long ago for my very first book in 2016. I still feel it and see it every day, which is that there is a part of us that that is the part of us that we don't often get to, is the part that often needs to be healed the most. And so what that quote came from was that I had gone all over the world. I had seen the best doctors in the US. I went to India for an experimental treatment, and I still couldn't stay well. I would get better, then I would relapse, or I would get better, but not all the way better. And what I realized is if Lyme disease is supposed to be a physical illness, purely physical, and I've done all the purely physical treatments that are supposed to work and it's not working, the simple answer for me was it can't only be physical. And that is when I decided to do something that I probably only would have been willing to do at the very last, the last leg of my journey, which was turn toward inner healing. And I also discovered, for people out there thinking like, I already go to a therapist, I already think positive, all these things. Trust me, I thought the same thing. My father was a therapist, so I definitely was accustomed to therapy. I talked about my feelings. I thought positive. I read Louise Hay. I did all the things. And what I realized is there's really something deeper going on when there's illness. There's some misalignment between your body and your spirit that is just trying to show you we can't live like this anymore. We can't be in harmony anymore when we live like this. And so for me, it was a lot about not just think positive, because that's really hard to do when you feel like crap, right? I mean, that was my most annoying advice people would give me, is you just have to have better thoughts. It's really hard to have better thoughts when you feel so crappy. It's also really hard to have better emotions when you feel so crappy. But I dug deeper than think better thoughts and feel better things. And what I did was I really, studied and discovered what inside of me could have been going wrong or just not quite right, that was stressing my body. And what I learned about was emotional baggage, and not in the way that we usually hear about it. So what I learned was the patterns like people pleasing, being a perfectionist, having victim mentality. There are many others I cover in my books, but some of those patterns that were just not helping my body be in its best place. I also, can be a very sensitive person and like to take on everything for everybody else, which didn't help me. I also bottled up my emotions, which eventually had a very physical impact on me. There were, beyond just thoughts, we all have programs of belief about ourselves and life that are programmed before the age of 7. And sometimes your thoughts can alert you to what you're believing, but these deep-seated beliefs like I'm not lovable or I'm not good enough or I'm left behind, these really deep-seated beliefs also cause stress on the body. And so the way that I started looking at my healing is what can I release that no longer serves me that will lighten the load on my immune system and my nervous system to allow me to heal? And so I went way beyond thoughts and trying to force myself to think positive. And I just was like, what's the root of this stuff? And, I learned some different techniques. I read lots of books and ended up creating my own self-healing method, which I now teach in my classes and throughout my books, because I felt like nothing out there was really doing it for the situation that I had with this chronic Lyme. Is so tricky, and everybody listening knows that well. And I felt like I needed a different approach. And so, as they say, if something doesn't exist, you got to make it for yourself. And that's what I did.
Yeah. So one of the big epiphanies I had when I was trying to understand chronic Lyme, and our listeners know that I don't have chronic Lyme disease. I was trying to figure out how someone in my life at the time was affected by it. And then I had just discovered that hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, were in the same particular situation. One of the big epiphanies I had was listening to a well-known Lyme doctor speaking about a lot of the things related to co-infections and treatments and things like that. And at the very end of a session of a webinar, he said, and oh, by the way, if you don't deal with unresolved childhood trauma, you're never going
Yes.
to recover from chronic Lyme disease. And you had just alluded to the fact that a lot of those things are built into us prior to
Yes.
the age of 7. And some trauma, the traumatic event, if you will, can be very traumatic. And some of them could be just sublime or something. But
Yes.
you need to get through this. A lot of your work, you say it fits into a type of energy therapy called energy psychology.
Yeah.
Can you go into that a little bit? Because I was quite fascinated by that. And I know it leads to a lot of the work that you do and helping people release blocks to get healed and to find happiness.
Yeah, of course. Can I go back 1 second, Fred? Because you said
Absolutely.
something so
Yeah.
interesting about trauma. One of the things that I wanted to say about trauma is trauma, again, if you think about the immune system and its natural capacity to heal, you want to think about what's sitting on top of it or burdening it that's blocking it from doing its job. Trauma is one of those things. And it was interesting that when I really delved into trauma, I couldn't find any major sort of traumatic events from my life. And what I discovered was what what's considered traumatic and what traumatizes you can be two totally different things. And I've done thousands of private sessions with clients. I've literally worked with thousands and thousands of people now all over the world. And over and over again, what we find is those traumas, quote unquote traumas that people need to deal with are the ones that they would have said, if they hadn't known me and I didn't force them to kind of go, okay, let's look a little bit wider, a little bit deeper, they would have said, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. That was like they minimized it. And so a lot of times, and part of my work is teaching people how to use their intuition and intuitive testing to figure out which things in their life traumatize them. Because when we're looking back, the really big things, the really big traumatic events tend to be ones that we've talked about, that we've done work on, that we've processed. And the trauma that really gets stuck is the stuff we pushed away. So it can be, being forgotten at school, in the school pickup line. It can be something your boss said to you on your first day of work. I mean, I find over and over again, those are the things that are really keeping people stuck. And so I'm glad you brought up trauma. And I also want to say for people to not just check check off the list, dealt with trauma, talk to a therapist. We need to really find a new way of discovering what am I still carrying? What is my body carrying that it's speaking loudly about, and not judge what seems quote unquote big enough. And all of my work helps people, get to those traumatic experiences that they need to deal with. But I just wanted to bring that up because I feel like sometimes people think, oh, I dealt with trauma and I'm still sick. It's my fault. It's not your fault. But once you've gotten sick and you're in a chronic experience, it could take a while to unravel these things. And that's normal. It took me a while too. So thank you for letting me interject in my little my trauma branch there. But I wanted to share that with people.
No, well,
So
just briefly, I mean, I really
yeah,
appreciate you bringing it up because we hear all the time somebody's Lyme may be in remission for some kids,
yeah,
decades or scores even,
yeah,
and then some type of traumatic event. Again, we're doing today's interview in the fall of 2024, and there's war going on and there's hurricanes going on.
yeah.
I just came back from Asheville, North Carolina,
I was
and
just there too.
oh, we'll talk about that afterwards. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's quite devastated, and anything, even a car accident, a lot of doctors have
yeah,
said that can trigger something. So you may think that it's there, and then unexpected. All right, so energy psychology. So let's move into some of the work you do specifically, and I'm quite
yeah.
fascinated. I'm excited to hear about this.
Yeah, and this is a good follow-up for our discussion on trauma because again, talking about things, while it's so good to go to therapy and there are so many benefits, talking about things doesn't always help you release them from your system. So energy psychology is a practice that allows us to work with the body's energy system, which everybody has, and the thoughts, emotions, and beliefs that interact with our body and our energy system. So again, we're going to sort of that deep programming. What emotions are stuck in my body? What things am I believing that I learned prior to age 7 that I'm still believing, feeling, and acting upon? If you believe that you're not good enough, you will go through life making decisions about yourself and your self-worth based on that programmed belief. And the way that this affects the physical is one, it's very stressful to go around believing at a deep subconscious level that you're not good enough. It is also not aligned with healing. How is your mind and body supposed to believe that you are worthy of healing when deep down you're programmed to insist that you're not good enough? So that's where these things really count, is where they bring you into alignment with the healing. They release stress and they bring you in alignment with the healing. So energy psychology is really just that. It's really working with these emotions, thoughts, and beliefs in a way that's more than just talking, in a way that's releasing them from your energy system, from your mind, and from your body. And those are all of the techniques that I either use or created. Again, because just knowing or being aware that this stuff is there doesn't always seem to be enough. And again, I don't want people to feel like it's their fault. I was one of the most self-aware, even from a teenager. I read Ram Dass and all. I mean, I was such a like hippie spiritual teenager, and just knowing and being aware isn't enough. So these are the tools, these are the techniques, like emotional freedom technique. Tapping was one that I learned early on, which I absolutely love. And then I created a few of my own techniques to help reprogram the subconscious mind, help us really release these stuck emotions from the body. So I use a technique called the sweep technique, like sweeping with a broom, that helps release emotions from the or release beliefs and reprogram beliefs in the subconscious mind. I also created a technique called thymus test and tap, which requires that people tap on their chest where the thymus gland is and release specific emotions. And I teach people how to find which emotions to release. Because again, if we're just trying to think about it, we're sometimes led in the wrong direction. And then I created another technique called alternate temple tapping, which really helps to release the fight, flight, or freeze pattern in the body, and a couple of others, but those are the main ones. So we're really doing the body mind thing instead of just doing body work or just doing, mind work. Your trauma, your stuck energy, your emotions, your emotional baggage lives in all of you, not just in one place. So sometimes talking about it alone isn't enough. And sometimes getting the physical treatment alone isn't enough because you're not getting it from that other angle.
So people listening to today are probably chronic Lyme survivors. Like I
Yep.
mentioned, they are in some degree of the healing process. So you just mentioned a couple of the techniques that you deliver, et cetera. Give some insights into the process, right?
Yeah.
One of the problems with chronic Lyme is that unlike a headache, there's no pill. As we all know, listening today, it's complex. It depends on, just not your body, the physical side. I mean, there can be neurological implications,
Yeah.
pain, brain fog, et cetera. And then we also throw in some of the emotional and mental things that we're talking about
Yeah.
today. Give some insights uh, on what people uh, can be doing to heal using your techniques. Is it a weekend? Is it going to take them forever? Just give some
Yeah.
insights into how this, for people listening that are anxious about healing.
Yes. And it's easy to be anxious about healing, right? Because when we don't feel good, we don't have the energy to do as much as we want. The other thing that I like to say too is we don't want to do too much. My clients and students always laugh at me because I give them a maximum of homework they can do. Because part of what happens when you're sick is you delve into the illness so deeply, of course, well meaning because you want to get out of it. But again, that's stressful. And anything that's stressful to that extent is counterintuitive to healing. So I tell my students 20 to 30 minutes a day is enough, and it doesn't have to be every day. So the first thing is it may seem overwhelming to heal, and it may seem overwhelming to know where to start. The thing that I like everybody to know is most of our emotional baggage is kind of like weaved in with our other stuff. Like people come to me and they say, I have 10 problems. And I say, you probably only have two, and all the things are related to that. So the core thing that everybody can work on is the releasing the deep-seated feeling or belief of being unsafe, being unsafe or feeling unsafe in the world. This is where so much of nervous system dysregulation comes from. And on my website, I actually have a free guided energy clearing for the suite so people can do this. So if people just go to my website, Amy B. Scher, Amy B. middle initial SCHER.com. In the top banner, there's a button that says start now, or you can go to where it says freebie, and you can start now. You can literally download that and it's like less than 10 minutes. And you can start now with reprogramming your body to release the trauma, to release the stress, to release this deep seated feeling that you're unsafe, to really try to calm you down at a deep level. And this is when the nervous system and the immune system can do the healing work, when you're taken out of fight, flight, or freeze. So that's the thing I tell everybody to start with. And I do teach in my book simple techniques just to start calming the body down. Some of the really easy ones you can do even before you go to my website and download this is to do things more slowly, walk more slowly, chew more slowly. Sometimes people will realize that even when they're on the couch and they get up to go to the bathroom, they run there, or they're eating and they're shoveling it in. Something that can really help the nervous system and this deep sense of safety to heal the body is just to do things slower, to talk a little bit slower, to do things in a more intentional way. It sends a signal to the body that there's no emergency here, that we're okay, that we can calm down. And so we get used to, because we are stuck in fight, flight, or freeze, doing things very quickly in a frantic way. But it's like sending an alarm off in your system that there must be something to panic about because we're moving so fast. So trying those starting right now can really start to help your nervous system get that indication or that message that it's safe to start feeling safe. And so that's where everyone can start.
That is great. I want to ask you a question. So again, you were a chronic Lyme survivor, and of course, we're talking today with Amy Scher and Amy B. Scher. Do you always include the B?
I do for some reason. And for all those people, so sometimes I get emails saying, what is the B? It's not mysterious. My name is Amy Beth. And so for all the people who are going to email me, that's my middle name. I don't know when I started including it, but it's stuck.
So I haven't asked this question in a while, but for chronic Lyme survivors, again, I wrote my book, Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. I thought that my audience was going to be people like me, people who had someone, a spouse, a child, a best friend, whoever, whatever it might be. And 90% of the readers, Amy, are chronic Lyme survivors who are looking for more support.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to ask you the question, having, again, gone through it and now being such a great guide for people on their journey for healing. What is your, how would you recommend to chronic Lyme survivors to get support? One thing that I've noticed is a lot of them have read my book. They listen to the podcast for two reasons. Well, for three. One is to get information, great content for people like you that we've had on the podcast. Two, it's to get some ideas on how to ask for the support that they so desperately want. And third, it's also confirmation. You're not alone. You're
Yeah.
dealing. That's one of the things. I mean, chronic Lyme is seemingly one of the most lonely diseases that are out there, as we
Yeah.
know. So, what's your advice for the chronic Lyme survivors on how to get the support that they may crave or need?
Yeah. So one of the things that I tell people to do is show up to groups or conferences or classes that have a host that can kind of create a positive environment. So when I was sick, I would go on message boards, and that was a disaster. Yes, I found people who understood, but it didn't help anybody because none of us could help each other. And so one of the things, that I say to people now is show up at some of these things. I teach classes every month. I often do a free Zoom thing a few times a year, which I send out if you're on my, my mailing list. Dr. Kelly McCann, who's wonderful, does a lot of webinars. Dr. Sanjay Schweig does some things too. He's in Northern California. Try to join up with a group or just take classes where there's a good community, because then it's structured. Then the conversation is led, and you will come out feeling more uplifted than depressed. I really remember this about my Lyme journey. It is great to connect with other people, but if all of you are miserable and all of you are complaining, nobody ever feels better. And so I would say that, it's important to not just connect with people who are feeling as bad as you are, to try to find people at different stages in the Lyme journey, or again, a doctor, a therapist, a teacher, just somebody who has a different perspective or is further along in the journey. So I think matching, having all of your friends be exactly where you are is not it. I know that it seems like the right thing to do, but it often doesn't end up being the healthiest thing to do.
All right. So once again, this is the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. Just want to acknowledge Amy Scher again. When I was first diving into this, your book was one of the first that I found. Your book on anxiety, and of course your memoir. And I know, just as a little bit of an aside, I have a Gen Y child who told me she was struggling with anxiety, which I didn't realize. And I gave her the book, and I went into her room one night, and it was like Post-it notes and pages
Oh, I
clipped. And
love that.
yeah,
I love that.
so I just want to acknowledge, I mean, the work that you've done for
Thank
hundreds of
you.
thousands of chronic Lyme and chronic illness survivors, but people in general who are struggling. I mean, this is a challenging time in the history of the planet, right? There's so
Yeah.
many things that are going against us, and then you throw on chronic illness, chronic Lyme disease, and
Yeah.
there's so many things. So I just want to acknowledge you for,
Thank you.
yeah, for what you're doing, not just what you're doing, but what you've done literally to help. I don't know if it's millions, but at least hundreds of thousands just
Yeah.
get peace, right? So,
Thank you.
so good for you. So give us a final thought, Amy Scher. Give us a final thing that you want to get across to the Love, Hope, Lyme audience to help them on their healing journey.
Yeah, thank you so much for that acknowledgement, Fred. That really means a lot to me. And, I don't get to hear from all my readers, of course, but my books have sold, I have books everywhere, translated in 20 languages. And so
Good.
just to hear that, I'm on sticky notes in someone's bedroom is just the best thing, because most of the time I'm just home writing alone. So what I would say is that there's always hope, and you speak to this, Fred, so beautifully, and it's part of your book and your work and your gift is that, again, I would like to reiterate that the month before I got better, the month before I turned a corner was probably the worst month of my life. And had I given up that month, I would have missed that the healing was on its way. So to remember that even if you haven't seen the manifestation yet or the improvement yet, your healing is always trying to meet you. It's always on the way. And I just want people to remember that, so that they're there and ready with open arms when that comes toward them.
All right. Again, so I want to thank Amy Scher for all the work she's done. I want to thank you for listening. Again, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, go up, give us a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. My name is Fred Diamond.